And hopefully we're back. Okay, on a new computer. With any luck, we should be able to get this going. Okay, it says we have green, and the question is, we're back, and it seems to be working. I've got something showing on here, which shows that we are likely okay. Oh, I can see myself. Shakily, but I can see myself indeed. How do I... Okay. So, where do we begin? First of all, I'm going to start again because I don't know how much got missed and how much got lost, but we're back on a new computer and I'm watching this little kilobits per second, and the computer can only... I can only be wireless on this computer too, which is more flaky than wired, but I'm the only one using the wireless in the house at the moment, so it should be okay. So I'm just going to watch it and hopefully we'll be okay this time. Okay, so I'm just going to message everyone that I'm back on the live stream. So just while I'm doing this and delaying slightly helps me check that it's all going to work well. It could be something, I don't know why it wasn't working. I think because my main computer has so much software on it, something somewhere got confused, but OBS actually I had to completely wipe it and start again. So it could be something in the OBS settings. The weird thing about OBS is I had to use it for some reason for the normal Blackmagic recording software kept flaking out. And so I switched to OBS, and the OBS for some reason would not do a high bitrate recording even though I set it to high bitrate. So I had to keep changing settings until it all worked. And I changed all the settings, and now I come up and stream, and now all the streaming settings are screwed up. So even though the streaming settings are separate from the recording settings, I don't know what's going on. It's very confusing, so it's not really reliable. So now that we've all got back, I'll just wait for everyone to see that it looks green, it's staying green, it looks like we might be okay. So I had to set up all the software all over again. So if we're all good, and okay, so I'm just going to get started again from scratch. So first of all, I'd like to thank everyone who has been a patron. I'd like to especially thank Albert this morning, who sent to be a super chat for me when before everything broke down, and thank you to everyone who supported me now and in the past, as this has made being able to make videos and review stuff possible. Now, ideally, I would make maybe at least one video, one review a week, or two or three. It's been difficult when I'm working because I work at across town at schools, and it's very intensive work. When you're trying to teach a foreign language to kids, if you're not like completely on the ball 100% of the time, they get really bored and switch off. And so Albert's donation broke the stream. Yeah, that's a funny way of looking at it. Let's just see if we're all the way back. My iPad's not showing we're back, but that's alright. I know you guys can see we're back because I'm showing on here, which is one of the weird unreliable things about getting this running. Anyhow, so before the OBS flaked out on me, I drew, one of the other things about reviewing stuff is I try not to overwhelm myself. I'd love to be able to have a good stream of stuff coming through, but with time and stuff stacking up, I'll end up forgetting about it. And things have taken time, such as one of the things I wanted to review was the Ultimate Ears Live, which I've got here, and I've been working on going to shoot those. They've been a really controversial pair of IEMs, but once you understand what they're designed for, they make more sense. And I don't want to end up collecting too much stuff and not giving it a thorough review. And there are a lot of people out there just pump out stuff and it's not complete. And I'm kind of a perfectionist, and I kind of worry about getting it right, and I make mistakes still. So I want to do at least decent reviews, at least feel like, okay, I'm ready to talk about this product. So I only have kind of limited space, which sounds ridiculous if you have a house, but you end up with limited space when you have kids who pile up stuff, toys and what have you as well. Some good news though on that front is I'll be doing reviews with speakers, not of speakers, but reviews of things like the Pro IDSD. I'll be giving impressions of that with speakers, so in a speaker rig. So I got a second-hand pair of LX speakers. I thought, no, stuff it, I'm going to go for it. I just got a pair, and a good amp to go with that as well. An Audio GD Master 10, and so that's going to be my speaker rig. It's just sitting over there now, and you can't see on the table here, but actually my little monitors have gone, my Adam Artist 3s. So that's been, I have more space on the table. I need like a table that's twice as big. And another thing is, support has gone towards, even if it's just small stuff has been really helpful, a couple of mounts for things like the microphone and what have you, and the microphone should be pointing towards me ideally, and, stuff like, even if I just have to get extra shelf or whatever like that, being able to do that without going like, because for various reasons, you can end up, dumping tons and tons of money into equipment, and I don't want to do that unnecessarily. So it's actually been good. I've already been able to just use my iPhone 10 for the IEM videos, which has been fantastic. Now, speaking of IEMs, I found in the cupboard a pair of RHA T20s, and these were quite good IEMs. I reviewed them a while back, dual dynamic driver, and I drew a name out of the hat before the video cut out, which was, I won't say his last name, Gurneil. And Gurneil, whether you're around or not, I'll contact you and you'll get it. These are yours, so if you're happy to receive them. So these are actually a pretty nice pair of IEMs, so I thought I'd get something decent out of the cupboard. There's stuff varying from like cheap little portable amps up to, hi-fi man IEMs, so there's a lot of stuff in there. And so congratulations, Gurneil, and thank you for being a patron. Also, in terms of site support, check out Paul Brooks, who you might know on headfi as Brooko. He is... when I was admin, he had the person with the highest reputation score. Now, reputation scores went public, but I was watching them out of curiosity. He received the most reputation for anyone bar Jason Stoddard of Shit Audio for his reviews and what he did. He is writing reviews on Headphone and Earphone reviews now, and I had a little thing up in the corner before which said here reviews, here.reviews. If you go to that, that's the short URL. And he's written up a lot of reviews recently. Some of them have overlapped mine in that we've reviewed the same product, but he has a different take from me on a lot of stuff. So you can actually get both our takes on it, both mine and Paul's take on what he thinks of a lot of gear. So do check out those. He's very, very comprehensive reviewer. I prefer short and to the point, more or less. He likes long and detailed, and so if you like, down to the everything, compare with as many things as possible, and he's very, very appreciated reviewer and very straight up guy, interesting guy. He's out in New Zealand, and so do check out the site and check out. Also, thank you to Kishore Patel. I hope I said your name correctly. I'm going to be I'm terrible with foreign names, so if I get it wrong, apologies. Thank you, Kishore, for writing up, reviewing. Well, I should say interviewing both Shankar at Odyssey and doing a review of, I was gone blank on the name. He's did 2 factory tours, and both of those are written up on here.reviews. For some reason my brain is just not computing names at the moment, but do check those out. That's really great to see that, and stuff that, I had a couple of photos of the old Odyssey factory I put in, but stuff I wish I was able to do more. It's really fantastic to be able to go up to a factory and interview people and actually see what goes into the equipment being made, because in the rare times we've had people like Rob Watts, or we've had the Shit Audio guys online, be able to talk about the manufacturing process and the issues that go into it and the problems that come up and all that, you actually get a better insight into what goes into products, instead of just, they come on, or every time a new product comes up until people give impressions, it's sort of like, oh, this is crap, that is crap, it's like, people trash stuff without understanding what goes into things. So, but speaking of, and Kishore just said, for people who are watching, I have some more great stuff in the works, and I'm really, really looking forward to that. Thank you very much for that. So, hopefully I can do some stuff around my plan. I'd like to do in the future is be able to go to, say, Korea and do Astral and Kern, and China and do FIO, and maybe Audio GD and that kind of thing, and do a factory tour, and interview and do some videos and other stuff. It'd be really interesting to see, because, go behind the scenes of some of these companies. Speaking of stuff that's come in, which I already talked about, but I'll go over again quickly. I've already seen the unboxing of FIO's FA7s, which are just entangled, which, as all good IEMs do, they've entangled themselves just as I put them down. The good old shiny IEMs. These are turning out to be really nice. Some short impressions are that they are a little bit nicer than the FH5s with, say, acoustic music and vocals, whereas the FH5s kind of have that punchy bass. It's a little bit better, say, with more modern or electronic music where you want that slightly punchier bass. I've also got in the, for those of you not on the Discord, I've got in the Brainwaves Alaras, which was surprised, like, Brainwaves makes a planer? What? Actually, they don't actually make it, they actually OEM it from another company, but all the same, it's been another $500 planer, which is going to give a give the Hi-Fi Man Sundaras a run for their money, and I've been comparing them, and it's been interesting. They're a little bit different tuned, a bit of a different tuning to what the Sundaras have, and so they're pretty nice so far. What else is coming up in the works? Of course, the Pro IDSD I've already talked about. I have the $350 comparison is on it in progress. I've done most of it. I just want to do a little bit again. The Audio GD came, R2R11 came in recently. This has been updated. It had, apparently the previous version had some issues with DSD and background noise, and that's been fixed. But this one has, I haven't tried DSD on it yet, but we're just getting around to it. But it's giving, it's going to be a big battle between this and the shit stack, I'm going to tell you now. It's, the MIMBI, you know, there's always a compromise when you're kind of keeping stuff like ladder DACs down to a low price, but these have the same modules as the larger R28 in there, albeit half of them, being it's single-ended, not balanced. Only thing really different is the reduced power supply size in the amp, and it's really, the difference comes down to the amping, as I found out with the Valley 2, where, you know, the tube you stick in it makes all the difference. So which setup is going to be better? Well, that's going to be an interesting comparison. And it's pretty fairly close down the wire. I mean, it's both setups are really, really nice to listen with, and inexpensive, and especially with things like the Alaras around here, it's been a good combination to match up for reviewing. What else have I got going on is I've got questions. A really huge number of questions came in the last day, so I'll get through those. So first of all, Kishore, your massive number of questions have been really impressive. Okay, so 12 Days of Christmas questions, which are in the description if you're watching this after the fact. What is your music discovery process, and what advice can you give us, those of us who are looking to discover new music? My music discovery process is to see what people recommend. Kind of, you know, there are threads where I recommend new music. One of them, what I listen to at the moment, is Radio Paradise, and it's radioparadise.com, and it's all one word, Radio Paradise. And that is, if you know about Paradise, California, which was entire town burned to the ground. Yes, it's actually named after Paradise. It's not actually located there. It was apparently in the past. So they've survived. Obviously, they're not in the town, but it's named after that very town in California, which is no longer with us. And they're just about to release their new website. So if you go on there now and you click on the beta player, it's a whole new website. And here's the cool thing about the streaming radio: it streams FLAC, and yes, over a web browser or in their app, which is in both Android and iOS. It can store up to 480 minutes of FLAC. That's a lot of, you know, it's a lot of data. Almost half a gigabyte of FLAC files it can cache in one hit onto your. Actually, you can do multiple caches of the music, so you can actually store a massive amount of lossless. And so I actually streamed that through my system when I was playing in the background. And they have a 10-level rating system and a comment system. So the 10-level rating system is in the iOS app too. So if I'm in the car and I'm sitting like, so I think this song is actually pretty good, I want to hear that later, I put it on there, and you can view all your ratings. And that's what I do, is I cut and paste into Rune, which essentially goes through Tidal, and I find the music and I create playlists of the stuff I like the best. And that's how all my playlists come about. And it's a very eclectic mix. It's a mix of everything back from, occasionally you get even stuff back as far as the 1930s. And it's very variable. So there might be stuff, you know, like, which is mainstream and popular, but there also might be stuff on the albums of music that's mainstream and popular. Maybe not the most popular song on the album. You know, it's very, very wide-ranging, the kinds of music that are on there, but it's mostly kind of more modern, like pop rock for the most part, with some bit of jazz and classical thrown in there. And it's very, very interesting, very wide-ranging music, and I really like that. Other stuff, yeah, it's kind of just hit and miss. Tidal sometimes, if I go through the genres, sometimes you find they create playlists, and sometimes I find stuff there. Yeah, it's just people's recommendations, and I try things and look around. But Radio Paradise has been my main one. Next question: what is the most expensive hi-fi purchase you have made, and was it worth it? Difficult one. I think it was the Stax SR009s originally. Was it worth it? That's a tricky one. I didn't have a really great amp to go with it, so I ended up selling them off. So yeah, was it worth it? I think if you really nail a purchase, like if you really get the right thing and you get the right item, you can get the right synergy in your system, it can be really fantastic. That's the kind of key thing. You know, if you have a great pair of headphones and they don't work well in your system, well, that's not so good. So like if I bought the Utopias, which if I bought them and I hadn't had a really high-end system, I don't think I'd be so impressed with them. I think I just saw some comment about the LX just earlier, and I think for most people and with a lot of gear, you know, like I've got this $350 system here, things like the LX and the kind of mid to high end range, like the Mr. Speaker's Eon range, are kind of about as good as people would normally need to go for to get with, you know, kind of moderate systems. So being worth it, I think you have to have the whole system at the kind of the same level for it to be really worth it. So that, you know, if I was going to buy Blue Hawaii, but I bailed out at the end, so I decided not to, because I didn't want one amp that would only work with one pair of headphones and one pair of headphones that would only work with one amp. You know, if I wasn't reviewing, I'd just sell off everything and get that stack system now, but that's kind of a different matter. Or speakers. Speaking of which, as I already mentioned, I will have speaker reviews up, and maybe a bit later I might turn the camera around and you can see the speaker rig, or you can see the messy desk that I had there piled with crap. What are some of your good trends in the hi-fi industry? What are some bad trends? That's a tricky thing. Good trends. Good gear is getting cheaper. That's probably the best trend. You know, you can buy Bluetooth headphones which are good enough. For, you know, you can buy a pair of Sony, the latest Sony, you know, Bluetooth headphones, and it'd probably be good enough for, you know, you wouldn't have to buy all this extraneous equipment. Just use your smartphone. So good gear is getting cheaper is the main thing. Bad trends? I don't know if there are any so much bad trends. Is maybe just, yeah, maybe there's the sheer huge amount of stuff coming out of China, maybe, which can be a bit which can sometimes be hit or miss. Actually, I'll probably say the bad trend is just, you know, the excess of electronics being manufactured. And, you know, there's a site called windy.com. Go to windy.com. It's really cool. It shows you like live. There are so many weather satellites out there. It shows you live, everything live anywhere around the world. Go to the CO concentration setting. It must be the extra settings. Go to CO concentration. Load that up. Move to over China, and you'll understand exactly what the problem is. It's like, it's so blatant. It's not funny. It just, the whole of China shows up as red and black, whereas the rest of the world shows up as, you know, maybe bits of brown and whatever here and there. Just China looks shocking. The amount of pollution it generates. So that's probably the worst trend about consumer electronics, is just the sheer amount of crap. You know, I was brought up in a family that bought stuff. You'd buy like a pair of shoes and you'd use them for 30 years. Like if you're a mass drop, you know, they always sell those chukka type shoes. That's what my father owned. Exactly the same kind of shoes. They were beautifully lined shoes, which he would just resell again and again and again. So he'd buy one pair of shoes or one jacket and he'd use it for at least a decade or 2 decades. And that kind of thing is much better. He said, a few streams ago you mentioned it was wholly possible to replicate tube sounds via solid-state circuitry. Why did Cayin take the risk and use Korg NuTubes? Well, the Cayin Portable has 2 modes. One which is solid-state mode with a balanced output, and that's completely free of the tube. It's more like, say, FIO style, where it's down to the measurements. You know, it's accurate. It's you know, what's the best way to say it? It's, you know, it's more you know, a technically accurate output. Whereas the tube mode is kind of, you know, induced second order harmonic distortion. It's kind of euphoric and that kind of thing. And about that, you know, tubes have, the characteristics tubes have is they might have varying crosstalk in different frequencies. They might have, they'll have, depending how the circuit is set up, you can set up tubes to have very little distortion. They're often set up to have even order harmonic distortion, and you can do this in solid state circuitry as well. I mean, it's quite possible. So how you set stuff up, you know, like the audio GD stuff, and one of the criticisms someone made recently about audio GD is, oh, they don't measure well. It's like, well, you don't understand what you're looking at in terms of measurements. Yes, they're designed with a slight amount of second and third order harmonic distortion because it sounds nice, and a really, really kind of straight down the line to the accurate circuit can not always sound pleasant to listen with. So especially kind of if it's low end gear, it can not always be the nicest to listen to. Like some people say, you know, we talk about the good old O2 amp, and you know, some people say, oh, that sounds fantastic, you don't need anything more, and then actually you listen to higher end gear and you go, oh, actually this isn't really that good. But it was made to, if we take all the nonsense and arguments out of it, it's really interesting to see what happens if you make a product which is, you know, accurate, technically accurate, versus making one which is actually, you know, a little bit euphoric sounding, like say the FIO X7 DAP versus say the Cal XM, which is a little euphoric sounding. It's, you know, when you're listening after hours and hours and hours, you know, especially if you're listening, especially if it's cheaper gear and you're listening with cheaper headphones, it might be a little bit harsh in the treble. After time, you're going to know which is going to be nicer to listen with. And so, you know, the real irony I was talking to someone the other day is I was talking to someone about guitar amps, and guitar amps are basically induced distortion. They're basically designed to produce distortion. So, you know, we care about low distortion with actually instruments and guitar amps, and a lot of gear is actually, and a lot of music is designed with induced distortion in there to make it sound cool. So it's kind of a contradictory thing. But I mean, if you're listening to, you know, like violins or something, or piano, where you really care about those fine details and the accuracy, well, that's a different matter altogether. But for most music, I mean, just heck, it's about enjoyment. You know, arguing about accuracy is kind of nonsensical. So that's just, you know, going off on a tangent there. But I don't see an LCD4 review. Yes, I could review one. I just have to ask. I've always thought of asking. I probably should organise it. It's one of those things, you know, there's a ton of stuff I should be reviewing, but it's a matter of time. So hopefully in the next year, I'm going to reorganise a few things, reorganise work. I won't go into details about that, but I'll have more time, basically. Will you be getting an IER Z1R for review? Probably. I talked to the Sony guys, including the engineers, and I just have to contact them. Their IEMs that they had on display this year. I didn't hear the Z1R IEMs, but I did hear their other models, and they're really fantastic. I mean, I was listening, there was a really funny conversation I had, which was with Ken Ball, not the last Tokyo show, but the one before. I listened to, at the time, the IEMs were the Atlas that he'd released, and I listened to those, and then we were talking like, have you, you know, just having this conversation, have you heard any good IEMs lately? And I thought, well, no, only the Atlas were the only ones that really impressed me that show. And it was kind of like but the Solaris, that really impressed me as well this show. And then also the Sony IEMs were really good. So both were really, really good. And the Sony engineers and people like Ken Ball are all really, everyone's cool. It's like, even though they're technically competitors, everyone's really cool with each other, and really, like, you'll see the engineers from one come around and listen to the other gear, and they'll go, oh, this is really good, and they'll really appreciate stuff, and show their appreciation. Like, everyone's really friendly. So it's really interesting to see what this new generation of engineers is coming up with in Sony, and so they were, yeah, I really like to audition those. What is the goal for your website? If you'll be posting messages, I haven't been quite reading everything yet. You got immediate and long-term goals. I think the long-term goal is like, I wish I'd got into like setting this up years ago, like say Darko or you know, the Headphone Guru people. I wish I'd put more of an effort in earlier, and so I'd like to build it up into a good review site, maybe with I don't know, a couple more people involved. You know, people come along, and you know, like Paul came along. You know, I just did it for myself, so I wouldn't have to. I didn't want to have to depend on anyone else, and I think that was the same with Paul. Paul can post his own stuff. I don't. Whatever he thinks and posts, he just posts, and we don't. You know, we can just, you know, enjoy doing it without having to kind of stress about, you know, like with headfi. You know, there's one person who runs the whole front page, for example, and so stuff gets missed, or you know, they're busy doing, you know, multiple jobs at the same time, because headfi is very involved with CanJam, and that CanJam is huge to organise, like you can't imagine. And so, you know, they can get a bit funny when you put a lot of effort in, and you know, you forget, you post a review, and then you know, you have to message them every time, oh, can you put this on the front page? Is this good enough for you in the front page? And then if you miss it, you know, you think, have you pissed them off, or all this kind of stuff. You don't have to care about all that kind of thing, and that's just to just be able to do stuff and enjoy doing it. And I like to build that up, and so have, you know, maybe expand. Maybe I could do more than just reviews. You know, as we've already started factory tours, and you know, maybe it can build into something more. Maybe in the future there might be a forum if enough people are interested. I don't know if I'd ever do that again because forums are kind of on the way out. Everyone does stuff on Facebook, you know. Maybe I'll just reopen the Facebook page. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But the main thing is just to be able to do our own thing and, you know, enjoy doing it and do it the way we want to. So, and then maybe have people involved, like I've had the patrons involved, which has been really, you know, excellent because you get to interact with people and discuss things. And, you know, like the YouTube channel, manufacturers go, oh, you know, there's something happening here. I'd like to be part of this and have my stuff reviewed on it. And I'd like that to happen in the future. So, can you do a 2018 roundup? Now, I already talked about this before the video screwed up. Yes, we'll be doing it with Paul. Already discussed it. We're a bit late, obviously, considering it's getting close to Christmas. But we will be doing a roundup of the stuff we've done. I mean, it's not been a huge amount of stuff we've had by, but we're going to kind of do our kind of lists. I've been studying to write up a list. He's going to write up a list. And we're going to see, compare, and we'll probably do a, you know, best of kind of thing, stuff that really impressed us. Out of what we've had through, which hasn't been, again, a huge amount. So, you know, for example, like best portable digital component. Well, you know, I haven't done any Bluetooth headphones lately, so it's kind of going to be a bit of an odd thing to miss out on. But, you know, it'll be interesting all the same. Predictions for headfi market or specific companies next year. I don't have any particular predictions. I think everything, you know, I don't think that you've seen any particular major trends other than Bluetooth has been getting more and more fantastic. It's going to be interesting to see how that comes out if the more enthusiast market overlaps into Bluetooth more. It's starting to edge its way in, but it's probably more of the factor that you can get a $99 Bluetooth adapter, which sounds great. And you get things like the XDSD, which I think is one of my favorite components of this year, because it gives you almost Mojo sound quality, but with Bluetooth. So that kind of thing, we're going to see. It'll be interesting to see how that goes, especially with LDAC. Once LDAC comes in the market everywhere, it'll be very interesting to see where that goes and how people make use of it, especially if you can do two-way, which may be a little bit tricky, you know, LDAC receiving, which not everything can do yet. Best value headphones or relating gear you've used? That's a tricky one. The best value stuff we'll discuss in the 2018 thing. Which headphone would you gift someone and give them into hi-fi audio? Good question. My thoughts for gifting stuff, the kind of headphones I thought were really good for people who are not enthusiasts but who would really enjoy. I thought with the Fostex, like the, was it the 610s, that kind of thing. You know, they're wood, they look nice, they have a generally good sound, they tend to power out of everything, you know, maybe that with the little Fostex amp, that was a really nice combo that I tried at the Tokyo shows, and I thought this is the kind of thing I would give to people, you know, like who are not enthusiasts, but who surely would enjoy it with whatever music they like. Obviously, you know, you can probably get better value out of this or that, but I think I would tend to give them something easy to use, attractive, and maybe a touch coloured in sound for that kind of thing, you know, like the Fostex range. So, any fun holiday plans? Well, actually, funnily enough, 3 years ago, it snowed here. And at the moment, it's 15 degrees outside. Celsius, not Fahrenheit, Celsius. So, whatever that is in Fahrenheit, I can't remember, somewhere around the 60s or something like that. It's ridiculously warm here. Today, I don't know why. So maybe it's going to plunge suddenly and snow the new year, but the weather's kind of freaky. So at the moment, I don't know. I haven't got any particular plans. It depends, you know, what family is going to do. I've still got to work. We don't actually have Christmas holidays here. The New Year holidays from January the 1st to January the 3rd, and then before and after is kind of work. And so probably at the moment, there'll be family stuff going on there. Next question from Default. What are some brands of audio gear that many people may not know about, in your opinion, is underrepresented and good value for money? An interesting one is Ocharaku. Now, Ocharaku made these really interesting IEMs, the Flat 4. They used two dynamic drivers which were opposing but with a little tube between them, and depending on the length of the tube and the design, they could actually tune them in interesting ways. He was an ex-Sony engineer, a really talented guy, and he runs a little tea shop of all things. I actually got tea from him. He really just amazingly fascinating guy, but he started making inexpensive IEMs, the Dongeri series, and some of those you can now buy on Amazon. I think they're only about $60, and they actually sound really good. So actually, I should actually mean to contact him and get some for a review. Now, I wasn't planning to do $50, $60 kind of stuff, but actually he His stuff is just so interesting that it's kind of hard not to. And he uses a really, really clever way of handling the sound by using like what looks like a screw to make a kind of tube. You can imagine the spiral threads form a kind of tube, and the way he designs the Dongri IMs is just like really unique. His way of making stuff. You actually see the Ocharaku IEM website. It actually shows pictures of how this is made, like how some of the stuff is made is really clever. And you know, this is interesting. Now you see, say, engineers leaving companies like Sony, and then they start doing their own thing. And they come up with some really interesting stuff. And a couple of the interesting ex-Sony engineers, unfortunately, have not shown up at the Tokyo shows recently, which has been sad. But some of them have come up with amazing designs and amazing equipment. Another one, Centrance. Centrance's mixer face is what I'm using for the audio at the moment. You actually through the microphone, and Centrance, the microphone which has now started moving on its own. The mixer face was it took him. It was delayed by him trying to get Apple certification, and he ended up ditching that idea because Apple kind of screwed him over. And he ended up with making this really cool interface for audio recording, which I'm using now with the microphone. But he also makes really good little, portable kind of DAC amp things. He is a really and he hasn't. His advertising budget at the moment is zero because obviously he's been very short of money after all the single disaster with the mixer face on the Kickstarter. But you know, he's pulled through slowly, and now some of the for really little portable kind of DAC amp kind of stuff is worth checking out his gear. Another one will be 11 Audio, which I already posted a YouTube thing about. This is a really interesting guy, and the battery-powered amps, I mean, I'm going to review them. Battery-powered amp with absolute dead silence. Like you can plug in Andrometers, super high-sensitivity gear, and absolutely black background. Like some of this stuff is very unique in design, and I do want to check it out. And you saw the really funny video. The guy and the woman who run that are really, really funny people. So that I'm actually going to keen to check out. And they're going to do a Socrest bass. They're going to do Socrest based DACs, which will be really impressive. So where else are we at? Sorry if I haven't read the chat now. I'm trying to get through all the questions. But Saeed came in with a question last minute. Can you do a mini comparison between the HEK and Sasvara? So when I tried the HEK V2, it was only a little bit behind in detail the Sasvara. The Sasvara can do better, but I think if I was to recommend a component, given the the price difference, I would get a HEK would be easily a choice. And I said in my video of the Sasvaras, I wish the Sasvaras had been 3K and the HEK had been like say 2.5, kind of lower. That would have been at the 2K mark. So the HEK would be yeah, absolutely spot on. Really, really nice headphones with almost electrostat-like kind of performance. But with Sasvaras, you need a powerful amp to drive them ideally. With the HEK, you don't. You need a moderately good amp, but you don't need an amazingly good amp. But they will scale up pretty well. So that's my kind of thought. Is that there's only a little bit of difference. But the Sasvaras, once they had been run in for a while, they actually sounded a little bit more detailed. But it wasn't like so dramatic that you're going to notice it on all music. It's only on better music you tend to notice these things. Let's see, where are we down to? Yethel. I hope I pronounced that correctly. What other kind of DACs are there aside from Delta Sigma and ladder DACs? The chord DACs. Simple answer for that one. That's kind of unique. Or there's the PS Audio ones are a little bit unique. There are some other FPGA based DACs which are not based on a chip or a resistor ladder. Or pure DSD DACs, the only other kind. Which DSD, if you output it straight into an analog circuit with a low pass filter, will result in audio basically. Are you going to review more streamers in the future, apart from the SoundAware Volume.io came up with their own Tinkerbell based streamer called Primo? That sounds interesting. I might actually. I might, depending on the features available. So I think I'd like to check that out because you can sometimes get better sound than directly out of a computer with a streamer. And I found even using the network input from this sounds a little bit better than the USB input. So kind of there's a little bit maybe a tiny bit harder or harsher sounding out of the USB, only a tiny bit, but you kind of go, this sounds a bit smoother, and so, you know, there's something in that, obviously. Tom T came up with a question, what is your take on vibration isolation? Dedicated racks and absorbing products. Well, you can maybe see it. I'm just going to check on my own stream picture. Yes, you can. You can see I've got Herbie's dampers under here, and that made a little bit of a difference, I believe. I felt it did with these because it's a tube amp. And tube amps, you know, you have vibration damping. It does help them. And with some amps, you can actually end up getting a change in the bass with these tube dampers. This one didn't, but I remember a Stax amp I put tube dampers in and it changed the bass. So I did try a rig in the US when I was at one of the shows, and it was just absolutely loaded with vibration damping gear. Now, it was of course music I didn't know well, but the whole rig, I think it was a Lampezator DAC and a Yoshino EAR4, and that was just amazing sounding. So I guess there is some science behind it. I don't know a lot. Like in everything produces very tiny micro vibrations apparently, so electronics do, they produce heat and they produce vibrations, and damping that apparently has some kind of improvement. I don't know. It's stuff that's maybe worth playing with. I mean, if you have a hi-fi dealer you go to and you say, you know, if you're on good terms with them, you can borrow stuff and see if it works. Maybe if they have vibration damping stuff there. There's probably stuff that I'd be inclined, like especially if it's a little bit more expensive. But I mean, if you have a multi-$1,000 amp, yeah, well, I'll just spend, you know, I'll try a couple of $100 worth of vibration damping stuff and see how I feel about it. Why not? Obviously, there's some stuff it's going to make a difference on, like speakers, obviously, how you set them up. You know, a lot of stuff comes with like feet which has spikes in them, so you can put them into, you know, like the rack will absorb the vibrations. So someone recommended go to IKEA, and apparently they were buying these chopping boards, these wood chopping boards, and they worked really well as vibration dampening. So I don't think you have to go necessarily crazy expensive, but it's maybe just worth checking out, and maybe it makes a little bit of a difference, maybe enough for you to care, maybe not. Maybe worth checking out. That's all I reckon. The next question is Albert C. We came up with a question. I notice the more I listen to high-end gear, the better I can hear the differences between pieces of gear. It's as if my ears are being trained by better equipment. I'm more sensitive to details, sound stage, and other technicalities. When you started, did you feel this way as well? Yes, I did. What I noticed is that I did a lot of like self-observation on sensitivity. I'll tell you a bit of an interesting story that probably it's related to sound but not about audio. Is that I had some trouble. The apartment I was living in before, there was some trouble with local kids riding around on bikes making a lot of noise, and I was determined to do something about it. What some people had done and been arrested for was going down and beating the crap out of these kids, which was very tempting because it was, you know, wake up in the middle of the night hearing screaming bikes going down there and waking your kids and causing trouble. It was really bad. What I noticed with these kids, like they had number plates which were on hinges. If you research Bossazocco, they're not real Bossazocco gangs, but they were pretending to be. And they hinged the number plates so that even if they were followed by the cops couldn't read the number plates and find out who they were. And no cop can chase kids on these bikes because, well, they can maybe on motorbikes, but it's kind of an endless thing. What you do, and if anyone's interested, I'll link to one of the old videos on this, it's pretty crazy, is they'll wait till they go down a road where there's nowhere they can ride off to, like parallel roads, and they'll run a barrier across at the last second, and then just literally catch all the bikes like in a big net. And they've got no choice. They'll literally go up and grab their kids and just yank them off the bikes. It's really amazing to watch. It's stuff that wouldn't happen, you wouldn't see happening in a Western country, but in Japan, you know, in Asian countries when they decide to get tough on people, that's the no holds barred. You know, Japan is still one of those countries where you can't claim police brutality. It just goes nowhere. They don't care. So this is a regular recurring thing. The gangs build up, and the people complain, and then the police go out and catch them all in a big thing. And they did this eventually. what I realised was that the kids during the middle of the day, in the middle of the day, they put their number plates back down and they ride nice and calmly down to the shops. Now, all their bikes had silencers on them. Now, if you know nothing about motorbikes, I didn't until I found this out. You have mufflers, which are like, normal motorbike mufflers, and silencers are kind of like a tube with not a muffler in them, but they kind of reduce the noise enough to be legal, and that's about it. And it's very clearly audible what the difference between them is. Now, I had no idea about this kind of stuff. A bike was a bike to me. I mean, I realised, bikes have different sounds and whatever. And so, in determining to catch them and get the number plates, I had to wait till I heard them riding down the road and then go out and take a picture. And when you're sitting, say, you're inside and you've got to go and run out and grab a camera, and you've got to grab a camera, and I've got to turn it on and the settings correct and all that. By the time you've set it up, it's too late, the bike's gone. So I had about 10 seconds. And so I literally hung the very camera that you're doing this video on, I hung it pre-set up with every settings on correct, on its strap out on the balcony. The balcony was sheltered, so if it rained, it didn't matter. And then it was all ready to go, so I had to pick it up and take photos. So literally what would happen is I got so sensitive to hearing any bike sound at all would cause me to jump, and I'd hear the sound, and I know instantly, I got so sensitive I could tell which bike it was and who was riding by the way they revved it. And I literally run out in there and grab the thing, and as they go riding past, I didn't realise I was looking down from the 5th floor, and I'd take pictures of the number plates. And then the police could match this up, because all these bikes had certain characteristics, like the gangs had certain things for putting their flag in. You could see on the bike that was one of them, and they'd tie a handkerchief around the front. Stuff like which group they're part of. It was still on the bike, and I'd take pictures of their number plate, and then detail, really good pictures of them, and then hand these into the police every week or whatever like that. Every few weeks, and eventually they managed to find all the bikes and round up the whole gang. Well, it was connected with a gang across town, so eventually they got the whole lot. And it got to the point that the kids knew I was taking these photographs, because I took some of them at night with flashes, because if I catch them in their abuse, it's proof that they had a rule they created which destroyed the gangs in Osaka and Tokyo, which was if you had more, I think it was something like 4 people on 2 bikes was enough to have that as a gang, registered to be flagged as a gang, and then they could prosecute them. So they made it really, really easy. So the very first picture I took had 2 bikes and 4 people on them, and so that was it. That got them hauled up, and like hauled up by the police on the spot. And then after that, it started going a bit crazy, and then it's all died down now, but there are still bikes riding around. But you do sensitize. This is an interesting experiment, because it sensitized me to sounds which I hadn't expected at all. So I found that when you focus on something a lot, you do notice a lot of stuff that you hadn't noticed before. So that's kind of my thought on that. Now I'm going to go back through all the chat and see what else has come up, because I have missed a whole heap, obviously. Well, not a whole heap actually. So Apple, thank you. So the first thing I'll mention again, if you haven't already, check out Paul Brooker on Headphone, one of the most well-known reviewers. His reviews on headphone-earphone.reviews or here.reviews is the easy way to get to it. Also check out Kishore Patel's factory tour of Apogee and of Odyssey. That was really fascinating reading of both as you get an insight into both of these companies. Apogee is, a lot of the music you listen to was recorded through Apogee gear, so it is worth checking out. So I'm just going to post the website there. So the short URL is very easy to remember, and I deliberately bought that so I could have it easy to remember. So question, full review of iFi Pro IDSD. Yes, it's coming. We've still got the beta firmware in there, so it's a bit flaky. So yeah, it's going to be interesting, but I'll also have already got impressions of it using speakers, which has been interesting. It's not radically different with headphones, but if you're wondering why, you notice anything missing in the rack, which has been there before. Now, if you're observant, you'll notice something missing, which is now in the speaker rig. So if you notice that, well then, good on you. Will I ever see a HE1 review from you? Oh, well, I'd have to find someone who'd lend me one. I don't think even Sennheiser Japan would do that. Do you prefer IEMs over headphones if you are not When do you prefer IEMs over headphones if you are not outside? If you're in a house where there's a lot of noise, you might, or in a place like, say you're listening in a library, like people who go to, who are students would prefer that. That's a good question, actually. When would you prefer them? When you need isolation, basically, and you don't want the noise of your headphones to go out and irritate people. So a lot of people use them at work. And then you have this, thing, you make what you do inaudible, so people have to tap you on the shoulder and can you hear other sounds? Is that important? It's a kind of a bit of an issue. But what don't I like about the Audio GD NFB 28.38? I don't have the NFB 20. I have the R28. What I don't like about it, but that's a good question. I think the relays and the volume can be a little bit clicky, and switching between DSD and PCM can sometimes give a bit of a pop. That's about the only kind of irritating thing about those. But it's a good question. An interesting thing here. I find the Radio Paradise FLAC live streaming sounds better with the apps, iOS and Android, than PC web browsing. Could be. An interesting thing that came up, and I've got to find where it's floating around here. I must have moved it and moving around stuff. We'll see, it's here. It's just over here. So I use this with the ferrets I've added after the fact, but this is a cable from a company called Minova, which is lightning to micro USB. It's got the camera connection kit built in. I tried putting ferrets on it, and I got a short one and a long one. And the short one's only about that, about that long, and it works great going from my phone to the Hugo 2. And I tried the long one, but the long one didn't sound as good. So if I used the long one, the sound quality dropped, and I'm like, what? I thought I remember the Hugo 2 sounding better than this. And so I switched them around. This is why I'm trying with the ferrets. Actually, it turned out when I turned the volume drive from my iPad to the Hugo 2 just yesterday, and I heard distortion on the louder parts of the sound. I'm like, what? It means it's not sending through bit perfect data? Weird. So there's obviously some weirdness going on. I thought of doing a review of this cable actually, but that's the 90% of the review just done there. And I use it for recording through the mixer face and my iPhone. So when I do the videos for IEMs, and that works fine. But for some reason, playback is kind of really odd. Okay, sorry about that. Oh, sorry about that. What happened was the battery ran out on the the battery ran out on the camera. So continuing on where we were before, with the sound going down. Give me 2 seconds. I'm just going to change the camera battery. One of the things I plan to get is a adapter so that this doesn't happen in the future, a power adapter. So that's one of the issues with doing long stuff is the batteries die. It's probably about time for me to finish up anyway. So once I work out why the battery won't go in. Once we get the battery taken care of. So let's see how we look with... there we go. That's better. Sorry about that. To err is human. To really screw things up, you need electronics. Let's find out. There are a few Radio Paradise channels. No, there's only one main Radio Paradise channel. RadioParadise.com. So I'll just put that in there. And check the beta player. So you've got to click on the beta link. Beta. And that's going to be their new website very soon anyway. What's the most surprising good product you came across for 2018? Question from Drunk Saru. Surprising good product.
maybe something like FIO M9 comes pretty close, and maybe could be the Campfire Solaris could be a candidate once it arrives, so it should be here today or tomorrow. It's when we don't think things can get better, and they do get better, which is pretty amazing. But surprising good product, that's a tough one. I'm going to think about my 2008 final, stuff soon, and I don't have a huge list of stuff I've reviewed, but stuff that's really surprising. So far, this has been pretty surprising as well. The R2R11 has been pretty good sounding, so that's what comes pretty close. How much of a big jump is the Master 9 from the NFB1? Is it worth upgrading? Just in case you haven't already checked it, I actually finished a review of the M9. You get more soundstage, you get more detail. This is basically everything's a bit wider. Is it worth upgrading? If you like how the NFB1 amp sounds, and you want more of that, then it might be worth upgrading. But that assumes you have already a really good digital source, like a really good DAC. So it's not a huge jump, it's a bit of a jump, and it depends, is it worth upgrading? And that's a tricky one. It depends kind of like if you want, if you listen to really good quality music, you have a really good DAC, you want more of that fine detail, then it's probably worth upgrading. It might be, but if you listen to kind of mainstream music, it may not be. If you have really, really good headphones like HT1000s or Utopias, whatever, then it's probably worth it. So all those things that you can get more than it might be. Sorry about the echo there. What happened was when I got the camera working again, I had both inputs running at the same time. Any experience with AudioFly? I met the guy who started AudioFly. If you like the AF180, fantastic. I should be reviewing stuff from fellow Australians. It's kind of slack of me not to do so. But I haven't heard their stuff for years now. Radio Paradise has 3 streams on the beta. I should try the other streams actually. You're right. So I use just the mainstream because I want to hear a large variety of stuff. But sometimes I get a bit tired of what they're putting on. So I'm going to try that. I'll compare PC versus Android. Well, PC versus iMac. But I think for me, with Radio Paradise, the quality is more down to like the connection, or it could be because the iPad, maybe it's a bit better from the iPad or something like that. Or ideally, I'd be able to stream it through my setup through the Hugo 2 and the Raspberry Pi. But I probably have to run a different system on that. So, yeah, there's going to be some room echo in here because it's just the way it is. But even with the mic here, it's going to pick up a bit. What I really need to do is actually put stuff up in the corners to stop reduce the echo. But I've actually got a lot more carpeting in here than I had before. So I'm pretty much done. We've been going for almost an hour. Any last questions before I go off? I haven't tried the AAA 789. I would like to borrow one, and maybe I will in the future. We'll see how we go. We'll review the Cavalli Tube Hybrid first, and then we'll see what else is coming. They sometimes have stuff available for review and sometimes not. Massdrop are running pretty fine, pretty close to the line with gear. They don't usually have much sitting around that they can send out for testing or reviewing or whatever. So kind of, I wanted to test their ladder DAC as well, but they didn't have a spare one. So they tend to get stuff into photography, and then that's pretty much it. Modded HE1K or HE-V2. I would have liked to have tried modding the V1 with some acoustic damping foam, actually. There's particular foam I wanted, and I wanted to get some from Fostex and try it with HEK V1. That would have been interesting, but I don't know. I haven't looked into what mods of those at the moment. I don't have one here to try and play with. But I do remember when I did have the HEK V1 that because of that gap, it's in my review, because of the gap between what the driver was and the earpads, there was that gap. If you did cover it with like cloth tape or whatever like that, it really improved the sound quality. And it'd be interesting, what I wanted to try was a particular kind of acoustic damping foam to fit that gap perfectly. Stuff that was used in the Fostex plane, the Fostex, what was it, the 500? I've just forgotten it wasn't TP500, had a slightly different name. They used this particular foam, and I wanted to get hold of some of that and try that, but I never got around to doing it. What is my schedule for live streaming? It's once a month. I could do more. Are you an Aussie living in Japan? Yes, I am. I'm Australian living in southern Japan, in Fukuoka. It does, when you spell it, look like it's spelled Fukuoka, but it's not. Fukuoka. I'm down actually. Korea is actually nearer to me than Tokyo. So, and so is Taiwan. Taiwan is like 1.5 to 2 hours. Oh no, Taiwan's about the same distance as Tokyo. So, am I still echoing? The only echo should be room echo, unless this is screwed up and dubbed. Sorry.
Try that. What happened is it decided to suddenly switch in the second input. Sorry about that. Have I heard the JH Audio Laylas? Yeah, I have a pair actually. I never got around to reviewing them because they brought out the V2 before I did a review. They're kind of similar to Andromedas, but they have more drivers in there. So they're designed for rockers who like turn it up to 11. That's why they have to maintain linearity, maintain headroom for people like that. Have you married a Japanese woman? Yes, I have. Yes. No, I came to Japan 20 years ago, originally, for a year. And that was interesting. Chased a Japanese woman. Done all that. Been there, done that. Yes, sorry about the audio. I had to switch, for those who just missed, I had to switch computers at the beginning of the stream because OBS was being an absolute pain in the butt on my other computer. I don't know why. And yeah, so I had to reinstall everything and try again. So some of the settings are still a bit flake. They're not quite perfect. I might just actually stick to using this computer, which is sitting here now for streaming, and use my main one for recording, because I think what happened was I changed this, it mixed up the streaming and recording settings somehow and screwed things up. We talked about the swapping the op amps in the NFB one with Muse op amps with the Burson 6. No, you've got it. No. This is a thing you have to understand. These op amps are not used for amplification. They're called DC. They're used for what's called DC offset. Audio circuits, I'm not an expert on them, but what happens is in audio circuits you have a constant DC voltage floating around in there, and to eliminate that DC voltage there are a number of circuit designs that can be used. There can be coupling capacitors, for example, which you have in like the sound aware amp, which is sitting right here, and the quality of the capacitors are really important to how the sound output is. And coupling capacitors are considered can be considered evil things depending on who you're talking to. The other way is to use a circuit that eliminates the DC offset through an op amp. I mean, it doesn't have to be an op amp. There are other ways of doing it, but essentially it's done through an op amp. You don't want DC coming out through your headphones. You will destroy your headphones. So what happens is they use an op amp. It doesn't have to be an expensive op amp. It doesn't have to be particularly fancy. So they used the old Burr Brown 2134, which is nothing particularly special. And so it can have a bit of an effect if you change them to the Muses ones. It can be a little bit better or a little bit different in some ways. It probably measures a little bit different. And I don't know exactly why this is. Again, I'm not an expert. I know kind of really basically how the circuits work. And so switching the op amp might have made a difference, but it's not something I go out and spend $100 on a pair of high-end discrete op amps. It's just, no, don't do it. It's totally not worth bothering with. They also have to have certain specifications for the op amp, otherwise you could do all sorts of funny things to the circuit. You don't want DC coming out to your headphones, it'll wreck them. So, did you pre-order your KFC for the KFC? I don't know what I'm vegetarian, by the way, in case you're wondering. I don't know if that's meant to be that KFC. Did I answer your question? I'll go back and yes, I did. Albert, I'm sorry I did, and if I did miss it, about the JH Audio Laylas, yes, I have a pair. They sound more or less like the Andromedas, but they have more drivers and can go really, really loud for old rockers who like to turn up to 11 or are very deaf now from overdoing it in past decades. So yeah, so they sound kind of really darkish, but really competent. So a bit too dark for my taste, but it's the same thing. If you have the really bright IEMs and people turn up the sound a lot, that brightness suddenly becomes piercing and destroys, you know, your high frequency hearing, which is why Val Colton of V Motor could you know, turn it up to 11 with his, you know, no treble peak dark sounding headphones, and you know, when he's, you know, doing the DJ thing and not destroy his hearing, or he's probably done some damage to his hearing. Have you tried the KSC 1500? No, I've got to get the KSC 1200 in for a review. That's another thing on my list. Yes, so that'll come in eventually. Sell me your Laylas. Well, I can't because they're not originally mine. No, Japan and Christmas equals KFC. Japan doesn't have Christmas. Well, it does in terms of selling stuff and getting a Christmas tree for fun, but actually the only holiday starts at New Year's. The real holiday in Japan is actually Golden Week holidays, where they crammed a whole bunch of holidays into 1 week. So people tend to sometimes can take the whole week off, or usually 4 or 5 days, if they're lucky. And LCDX versus HEK. Well, no, the only LCDX I had were the very, very, very original pair, one of the first batch, and so the drivers are probably different to what they put in there now, so I can't answer that. But HEK is going to sound better, I reckon. Any news of the Ether 2s? Oh, I've got to talk to Dan. Another thing I'm behind. I've got to talk to Dan as well about stuff, about being able to do that, so that's on my list. Again, for people who missed the very beginning, ideally I'd like to be able to do like 2 or 3 reviews a week. The problem I have is just time and work. I have to drive across town to go to work, and then coming back, and then I'm dead tired. And so I can ask a lot of people for a lot of gear. I mean, I have, okay, you want to see my business card stack? And this is nothing compared to people like Jude of Headfi. This is nothing, okay? That's the stack. I was actually getting it out. No, actually, that's not the stack. There's more. Okay, this is the stack, okay? Collected over by country. It's now got flagged by country. There's probably more than that. This is just the ones where people had the business cards to give me. There are a lot of companies I'd like to contact, but then I'd have to have a second house to fit all the gear in. And I'd run out of time and it would never get reviewed, and I don't like doing that. So my aim is, which is why I've been asking for supporters, is that I can transition some of my work to doing reviews instead of doing teaching. And then, you know, maybe eventually I might do like Darko did and switch just to reviewing, which would be really cool. So that would be a nice eventuality. But how I go about doing that, well, I'm going to see. At the moment, I'm asking for Patron support, and we'll see how we go. Whether that will, maybe I have to get other kinds of support in, you know, kind of scratching my head about that. But at the moment, I'd like to do some, continue on doing stuff, but doing more reviews, and then moving stuff at a reasonable pace. And part of that is like, for those who also missed it, at the beginning I drew a name out of my basket. I cut up a piece of paper with all the patrons' names on it and drew a name out, and then one person won a pair of RHA IEMs. So I'm giving away the stuff that's I don't need anymore for comparisons or what have you, that helps clear out my cupboard, and probably doing larger stuff later as well, although the shipping on larger stuff is going to be pretty impressive. That will help keep things clear, and you know, I've got a lot of plans I could do, but it's a matter of support and time, and stuff I'd like to do. So maybe eventually I'll do this full time. We'll see. Best deck under $3,000. That's interesting. Well, I've got. That's a tricky one. It's very, very close. I go by the features you like. If you're choosing between, say, like the Audio GDR 2R7, Yggdrasil, and iFi Pro IDSD or Hugo 2, well, if you need portability, there's only one choice. If you want to be able to play around with all the word clock stuff, well, there's only one choice. If you don't care about DSD, you want to buy American made, there's only one choice. That kind of thing. So it's more comes down to features, but all are excellent. Hugo 2 with iFi USB 3, yes, is what I use for preference. I'll discuss that. Wait for the Pro IDSD review. I know what I'm going to say now. And it's interesting where you have this issue of, do you make things perfectly accurate sounding, like the Hugo 2 is designed to be perfectly accurate sounding, or do you make things a little bit coloured and euphoric and have it a little bit more entertaining sounding? And both have their good and bad points. Or the audio GDs with the slight second and third order harmonic distortion, which they allow to creep in just to make it a little bit nicer sounding. You know, the ladder DACs are really, really pleasant to listen to. They're not the most accurate by any means, but very, very pleasant. So, you know, that's one of those things that comes up. What speaker system am I using? Well, I have, let's see if we can turn the camera without stuffing it up. There's a risk here this is going to screw up, okay? So, I'll turn the camera around, and I think I can do it without disconnecting anything. And you can just see with the messy desk and everything, you'll see if I can adjust it. And there's a light in the way, I have to tilt it. You'll see the LAC system. LAC speakers in there. And an Audio GD Master 10, I've got a light in the way. So let's get out of the way. So that's there. And it's you know, a bit messy at the moment, obviously, because I've got a desk which I do multiple things on. And a whole bunch of boxes which couldn't fit in the cupboard, which I've got to sort out stuff. And there'll be a Master 10 which I can't move the camera without stuffing up moving the camera everywhere. That's going to be the speaker system. And they're FS247, so they have a bass port at the bottom, which is better suited for this room because I don't want to have to deal with bass traps. Although my bass trap, as you can see on the left, actually is a set of shelves, and I'm going to get a very, very narrow set of shelves on the right. There's a bass trap. But basically, my bass traps are shelving. So that's one thing I didn't particularly want to have to deal with. So hence the choice of speakers. And I got them second hand for a very good price because they had slight cosmetic damage and they repaired the damage with some lacquer, and I don't care about that. I don't know. I can't even see the damage from here. So that's the speakers I have. Do you have experience with Audio GD speaker amps? Well, that's where I'm starting. I've got the Master 10. Like their headphone amps, they're very, very linear. They're very, very neutral sounding. You know, they just get out of the way and let music through. So that's how they are. And the best person to speak to someone like Magna Hi-Fi, they really know the Audio GD stuff well. So an interesting thing, discussion about higher end gear and lower end gear, is that I may have been one of you guys is talking about how, you know, I'm known for doing mid to high end gear, so I'm going to probably stick with that. And I'll do a little bit of lower end gear and I'll probably do some Bluetooth headphones as well, because if it interests me, that's worth doing. Would you review the Audio GD AS1? Probably not. And the reason is, well, it'll be interesting for experimental sake, you know, what happens if you tune something to be perfectly dead, absolutely neutral. I don't know why he bothered making that. I think it had to do with that. And as I've said this before, I don't like criticizing people unless it's extremely warranted. But a certain site where someone claims to be doing science but is actually proven to be grossly incompetent is really damaging to, like, the online, really damaging to when you're doing something and claiming science and doing it incompetently, it's extremely damaging to, you know, people in general, that you're giving out false information and claiming to be doing something that you're not, and ignoring criticism, and then it benefits nobody. But speaking of accuracy, you know, stuff that's made to sound accurate versus stuff that's made to sound euphoric, well, you know, that's one of those things that is interesting from the point of view of, you know, there are people who prefer stuff that's more euphoric sounding versus more accurate sounding, you know, but I don't recommend buying gear on thinking, oh, this has got the most accurate measurements, because it can't always be the most enjoyable. Now, I prefer the Hugo 2, for example, and that's probably the most accurate, one of the most accurate DACs out there. Technically, in many different levels, it's an extremely accurate piece of equipment, as is the Mojo, as is the Dave. But, you know, there are some people who said, you know, I prefer the IDSD and the sound with that. And listening and comparing, I'm thinking, well, you know, I prefer the Hugo 2. I can hear that precise depth and everything like that. But listening to the Pro IDSD, there was some music I actually preferred using that. I was listening with the susbars actually directly out, and I thought, you know, that makes sense. I can understand with certain music, you know, certain kinds of setups sound nicer, and with other music, other kinds of setups sound nicer. So both are appreciable. So this whole thing about arguments about measurements and all that kind of crap is kind of useless. Knowing a little bit can be worse than knowing nothing in this kind of case, because you can be given false info. And this is an argument that came up online where someone said, why doesn't hifi publish specs of the Pro IDSD? And it's like, well, let's say you have a THD spec and they say 1 kilohertz of this, it has this amount of total harmonic distortion. Well, under what settings, under what setup, you know, with what circumstances? These things are so, like, distortion figures are so complex, and they are often, you know, just, you know, back of the box random information. It means nothing. You know, the use of measurements is, you know, they're extremely complex, and how they relate to what we hear is, you know, usually not, unless it's something a particular, like hearing particular amount of, you know, particular unpleasantness in a pair of headphones at a particular frequency. That you can say, oh, look, there's a distortion spike there because maybe the pads are resonating. Like Rados had that problem, like you tape the pads and it reduced the resonance. That kind of thing you can nail down. But other stuff, you know, unless you've got nailing down exactly measured distortion versus what you're hearing is really, really difficult thing. And, you know, making claims about this piece of equipment is good or bad because some person who doesn't actually uses measurement gear once a month, and this is not a joke, literally once a month, not a measurement expert, playing around with gear and then telling the manufacturer of the measuring equipment how to use their gear. That is really, really worse than useless. So let's go back to the messages here. Last messages before I'm going to go is, because I've already been going for over an hour, heavy drapes over glass when playing music. Yeah, I've got actually some blinds that pull down. I should get drapes. I could get drapes, but drapes are actually more of a nuisance. I got given by my father-in-law these great blinds which are very efficient and perfect for double windows. I don't want to have to set up more curtains again, which would reduce the room size. But yeah, I probably should do something about the glass. How often do you listen to the headphones on the stands in the rack behind you? Recently not so much, just the SVRs, and lately, so actually the stuff that's up there tends not to get listened to much. Have I heard the new Sony? Not yet. I'm not accepted a meet, and I'd like to borrow a pair. Does the Master tend to run hot? No, actually it runs almost same as an Yggdrasil, almost nothing, which was very surprising. I was expecting to run very hot, and it runs like nothing. I haven't, tried running. I don't know if it runs hotter. Maybe if I ran 2 ohm apogees through, with 2 ohm apogees or something like that, it would probably run very hot. But no, it doesn't run hot at all out of just these with the LX, like nothing. You wouldn't even know. Almost don't know it's turned on. If you do get into Bluetooth, I should compare some Bluetooth IEM cables. Could do. That might be interesting. That's true. There's stuff that's coming up a lot lately. Hugo 2 versus Audio GD Master 9. That's like 2 different kinds. That's an amp versus a DAC. The Hugo 2 directly is going to sound better than a Hugo 2 through an Audio GD Master 9. I've already tested that. You're going to lose some detail between going direct versus going through an amp. The only time it can have benefit going through an amp is if the headphone drive, like SVRs, are just not going to drive directly out of a Hugo 2, whereas they will out of a bigger amp. So it's a choice of losing detail versus, maybe, depending on the circumstances, better drive. But for most headphones, Hugo 2 output direct is going to be better. I should have gone for the high output version, you're correct. Is Hugo 2 your only DAC? Oh, they're talking to Craig there, okay. Will you get a chance to review the Headamp GSX Mini? There was a plan to do that. I'm just waiting for a reply from them. Would you think an Audio GD amp would pair well with apogees? You'd have to ask Audio GD. So if you're running really low ohm stuff, just contact Kingor and ask him. It could be. So you just have to consult him. The nice thing about Audio GD is you can customize stuff as necessary. So the Master 10 I got customized. I got one single-ended input has and one balanced input had volume bypass, and I've got a volume bypass in the ACSS input, which also has the large 4-pin XLR ACSS input, which means I can do longer cable runs much easier than I can with those tiny little the mini XLR sockets. The bigger ones are much easier to deal with. Anyway, this is the end of the stream. Thank you all for watching. It's been a while, talking for an hour. I'm going to go off, and I've got more kids to teach this afternoon. What do you do with the balanced option using Hugo 2? You don't. You use single-ended. Just reading off the questions here. So, Craig, I'll give you a suggestion. Hold out for the next firmware update before going for the hifi IDSD. But, unless you really, really, really want it now. But then it's a little bit flaky at the moment, but not too bad. But it should be pretty good once they've got all the firmware settled down. So, thank you all for watching. Thanks once again, all my patrons. Thank you, Albert, also for contributing. Thank you, Kishore Patel, for contributing. The factory tour has been fantastic as well. Again, also congratulations, Gurnil, on winning a pair of RHA IEMs, which I'll contact you and send them off if you missed this live stream. Yes, thank you everyone for your support, and I'll see you all. What I'll do is, for the people who wish, one last thing before I go, is a special bonus, which just means I have to do a few clicks here, is for one day, anyone who may be interested can join my Discord server. And you won't get to see all the stuff, all the Patron stuff, but you get to see some of it. If you'd like to join and join in the chat, a few more people will be definitely welcome. So, other than that, thanks for watching, and I will see you all online.